Hey guys, what up? It's me, Little Tech Talk. It's kind of a little bit more of an in-depth tech talk, and it's actually not exactly what you would call tech per se. I just wanted to do a quick breakdown of what's going on with the core, the force, well, the core's aircraft, and like the roles that we talked about before. I wanted to bring this up because there's been a lot of discussion in the recent past of what they do and so on and so forth, like what they mean. And I mean, this is like a role debate that we've always discussed before, but we really, like, I don't know if anybody gets it per se. You know what I mean? So I'm going to do a quick thing here that actually relates out to everything so people can understand. This may actually require a little bit of cross reference out of you guys because you just don't know unless you know. And by that I mean, okay, as Americans, we're used to the American Air Force, and we've heard of the Soviets and the French and the British and blah blah blah. But a lot of people undergo the current day and age of having to do like, you got your planes, but you've got like one plane to do it all, and like limited, like you condense all your aircraft down so that only like a few aircraft do the role of many aircraft. And if any of you have researched and know about planes from back in the day from till now, you understand that like this is probably the fewest amount of any one given type of aircraft that any armed air force has had since the advent of said armed air forces. In the paper world, we don't have to deal with that. IVPAC has brought all those back so we can have multiple designs out of its designers and contractors. Um, the reason for that being, of course, that we want people to enrich their designs, enrich their ideas, enrich the folding and capacity for building and stuff like that. So that being said, we use the core uses a group of roles that you wouldn't typically relate to something nowadays as so much as it would be in the past. By this, what I mean is when we talk about javelin, when I talk about my javelin, for example, my javelin is my interceptor. It's just a straight up interceptor. Nowadays, of course, if you were to hear of that, see that, and talk about it, you would think, well, in the U.S. Air Force's term, it'd be the F-15. In the French Air Force's term, it'd be the Mirage 2000. The British Air Force, it would be the freaking Typhoon because that plane does everything for them. We don't like that. I mean, well, some of us do, but others don't. I don't like that. Okay. And yes, granted, I'm mostly going to talk about my own affairs, but you can relate out to any other contractors in IVPAC, and you'll learn, of course, that we all have our different planes and so on and so forth. Um, what you see in front of you is an example, many examples of the 332. I was going through and checking out the amount of 332s that I actually have, and this is all but two of them. I really want to say two, but I think that there's. I can't. I don't think that many's missing, but I'm not entirely sure. So anyway, there's a bunch. There's even more that you can't see, but there's a bunch here. Um, so yeah, there's a bunch here. There's like 30, and I've lost two. Well, I've lost one for sure. Anyway. So I use it because 332 is a prime example of me anyway. Has still I've actually decided on perhaps the way of going the Air Force's route isn't that bad of an idea. Maybe. But anyway, I digress. We were talking about the interceptors, and I say javelin. Okay, but javelin is the truest form of the interceptor. So you kind of have to go back to the 50s, 40s through 70s, in as far as we had planes that strictly did interceptors. Again, if you use the United States Air Force, America's Air Force used straight up interceptors for a period of time. The P-51 was considered that after it stopped being an escort. Didn't last very long, but then we used the F-86, the F-100, the F-102, the F-106, which was the penultimate interceptor. Before we decided to get rid of the entirety, like we basically said, like, well, F-15 could do it, and then we started diversifying our portfolio, so to speak. Um, so in any case, if you look at it as a singular role, then I would guess to say that like Javelin is my F-106. Again, I want to use the United States Air Force because it's not that I know it the best. I know everybody's pretty well. It's more that thanks to the massive budget they've spent on diversifying has led to like multiple aircraft types, so I could use it the most. Um, but starting off with Javelin as an interceptor, and again, I like to point out, fly straight, straight up, straight. Okay. Okay. So we recently did away with the fact that we had like close, short, medium, long range for all the attack slash striking aircraft. All of that is considered strike. The umbrella roll. If you've seen our roll sheet, you will know this. And there is, of course, a roll sheet out there. It's it's not what you would call like it's not oh good lord, what do you call it? It's not a Bible per se. It's more of a guide, but everybody's considering it a little bit of both. So yeah, I guess you could say it is in fact that. Oh, that's just horrible hell. Yeah. Anyway, no, it's more the fact that the sheet is a way to like get an opportunity. Like it describes your flight, it shows the length of your flight, and then what IVPAC considers the major roles that you need to have to be in IVPAC, and then additional roles that we intend to have, and that I was talking about. Like, okay, so we don't have an F-15, but we have an F-106. So again, and we recently condensed close, short, medium, long range. Um, I'll give you a quick show up here. This is the sheet in the example we're talking about. This is the roll sheet, and as you can see, like some of us, not all of us, but some of us have it kind of filled. Others of us are working towards filling it. Um, but as you see over there on the left side, you have the areas here that actually indicate whether or not we have a guide that breaks down like the core 5 roll, which we indicate like the core 5 that you need to have to get in, and the interceptor is the top. Paper air combat is probably your interceptor is the most important because, let alone intercepting other planes, you could actually use it to intercept people. So it's pretty good at that. And my company, still here, I've got Javelin in there, but you see others. Everybody else uses it to keep track of their other stuff. So we got a flight plan. We got the range showed you so you know exactly how far the plane should fly. Obviously, the roll designation. This is the umbrella roll, which we consider. We got fighter, bomber, strike, airlift, and trainers. Um, that's basically it, but everything falls under those at one point or another. And again, like, if it was the U.S. Air Force, the British Air Force would be 2 lines. But, like, they have, like, a line of electronic warfare, airlift, and then fighters. And fighters are all encompassing. They do attack, they do reconnaissance, they do strike. You know, it really sucks if you're, like, an enthusiast. You long for the 60s when there was, like, 8 planes to do 1 roll instead of the other way around. But anyway, so we're following suit with like the 60s where that happened. So again, we did a little of condensing just because I kind of set it into motion, and I did it so that there would be a little bit more of a breakup in the reserves and the active duty. If you made close, short, medium, and long range, you had 4 roles in active. Well, if you did close to short, short to medium, medium to long, there was only 3. 1 role disappeared, and you can have something go back over into reserves if there's like a plane. I mean, we still have a lot of planes, as you can see in there. So I'm using doubles in certain cases. Everybody does that because like your heavy bomber should probably be your heavy airlift and vice versa. Medium bomber, medium airlift. Even the light and the fighter bomber could be construed as that. But that starts to get into like territory where you might be like, maybe not. You might even consider that your lead-in large trainer as your light transport or light bomber if you choose to go with a light bomber. I consider that a fighter bomber, therefore the size can be a little bit more something along the lines of a 332, a bigger plane. Instead of like 7 inches long, it'd be like 10 or 11 inches long, and they're on bigger. But anyway, so the rolls, as you can see, the core 5. Then we got to break down to like a recommended next expansion. So if you want more designs, if you're going to expand with us, these are the next ones to get. 6 more rolls here, and then there's like a full expansion when you include these. And after that point, like, I mean, basically past the 5, you don't really need any more past the 5. This is just like, this is going above and beyond. They all really are, but this is just ridiculous territory. These others here are more like, yeah, we encourage this. We recommend, but don't encourage it. And this is like, hey, if you want to do it, go ahead. So if you read it, you can see that, like, obviously some of these ones, like control fighter, patrol fighter, dog fighter. A lot of the fighters are slotted into like a full expansion because, seriously speaking, if you talk about paper planes and you talk about combat with paper planes, you really don't need many fighters at all besides your interceptor. I mean, seriously, there's just no reason for them. Um, you don't like dog fighters. They don't buzz around each other. There's no pilots in there, and who's going to say they win? The only way you win in paper airplanes is like you shoot one down with another one. So this is in fact what we do. Um, in any case, so that's why it's like the recommended next expansion. This is the full expansion, then extraneous. These just go to show all the testing and aircrafts that we're doing and the designs that we're working on and so on and so forth, blah, blah, blah. My sheet, this is my sheet, so mine looks a little different from everybody else's. They probably keep track of theirs first instead of mine, but mine is, I'd argue, say, the most complete. OAE's looks pretty good, KIA's looks pretty good, and a couple of them, the only missiles looks pretty good, but the only ones that actually have like aerial demonstration teams, which I haven't really gotten around to doing it because I want to design something for it and haven't done it yet. That's like, again, it's totally extraneous. But anyway, going back to the roles, so like interceptor, javelin, F-106, look it up. True interceptor, it could do nothing else practically. But like a dogfighter, for example, we can bring it into today's world. That's like an F-16. F-16 does a lot more things than it used to, but like back in the day, a dogfighter would have been a highly maneuverable aircraft. And ironically enough, we didn't really have something like that back then so much. We just let other planes do it. An F-104 would be a good example of an interceptor, but as far as a dogfighter goes, it's funny how we like kind of did away with a true dogfighter because we didn't have anything maneuverable at that time. Even though we did like leave the P-51s and do dogfighting in World War II, and we do F-16s now since their birth as dogfighters, but not really in the time frame we're thinking about. But in any case, right now I have my Phase 6 doing that. Because it's what it does. It loops around. It's kind of got some range to it, but it gets high, so on and so forth, things that you kind of need to do. Short to medium range attack. When it talks about ranges of attack planes, if it translates out to real life, it's a little bit different than you would expect something from. Like real life versus paper, and like planes, it could be argued what gets considered as medium to short range and so on and so forth. So it's kind of like what would dogfighter would be. So you could probably make both planes the same way. You don't have to, but you can. Either way is recommended. So those planes, of course, Jesus Christ, those planes are. I noticed I was getting a little bit weird. I have Diamant in that role, for example. And I hope to actually, in the coming months, when it actually gets warmer and less snowy and stuff, I will talk a little bit more in depth because I'll show some clips of these planes flying in here, and then you'll know exactly what you're talking about, how long they are. But you can witness a couple of these videos on our site here in the clips to see exactly how the roles are explained better than this. The medium and long range penetration, obviously a long range strike aircraft. The Strike Eagle F-15E, pretty good example of that. The F-111 was a pretty good example of that. Back in the day, practically used bombers for it. We didn't really do long-range strike. The F-111's been around for a long time, so we'll kind of give it to that. Again, look all these up if you haven't heard of them before. Medium bomber. You know much about like our current bombing fleet. Even the U.S. Air Force. There's only 3 bombers, and there's really no like. All of them are considered heavy bomber, not just because of their range, but because of their bomb load. I mean, it's all relative. You'd have to go back to World War II to actually have a little bit better examples of this. However, even in the 60s, like when you had like the B-52, which, is ageless because they won't put it out to pasture, but like you still had an FB-111, kind of considered a light bomber, the B-58, or anything in between there, kind of B-66, consider those medium bombers, even though Air Force never really used them as bombers, and then the buffs and so on and so forth that would make heavy bombers. Obviously, strike aircraft and bombing aircraft are the other bread and butter of IVPAC. I mean, the interceptors need something to shoot down. The other planes are trying to prevent you from shooting them down and bombing other aircraft. So that's why all the rest of the strike aircraft / bombers are your primary aircraft. My longest range phases, the 4 and the 5 and the 6, 4 and the 5 are my medium to long range penetrators. Medium bombers, Supernova, it's an upsized Nova for me because they're upsized. They're about the size of the cutting pad that we do. So it's like a 12 by 18. Close to short range support can be argued, but they're really close to range of short. I love to use the A10 or the A1 Skyraider from the Vietnam War era as a prime example of this because, or even closer as the OV10, the O1, the O2. These planes were like the epitome of these kind of aircraft that I'm talking about. Banshee does that for me. The dive bomber, that's going back to World War II, and we practically never use it again. But obviously, again, we need it for paper, or I like to have it for paper. Vampire does it. Any of your stunters that you could see as a dogfighter, the close range, and the dive bomber should all be able to do the kind of stunting that we're talking about. Dive bomber is just bigger, I consider it. So, or just carries a heavier bomb load. And while Vampire is not that much larger, I have upsized it, and its wing ratio and chord allow it to carry like a heavier load. Heavy bomber, heavy airlift, I upsized, as we talked about before, upsizing your interceptor because your interceptor is basically just a straight and very tough aircraft and can take add-ons very well. Your interceptor is a great example for that, a good plane for that. So I use Pylum, which is an upsized Thunderbolt. Um, Javelin. I said Thunderbolt because it's on the brain, but all of us practically have done that. Use an upsized version of our smaller planes. My light fighter bomber. I've got Fury here because I like calling the Wasp the Fury when it's bigger, even though Wasp is smaller. But as my fighter bomber, I use light as a slash in here, you'll notice, because some people term it their lights. And you may want to break that down into two planes. You're welcome to, of course, but I don't do that. I just see it as a fighter bomber, thanks to me having the FB Phase 3 do it for the longest time. And most of your bombers, as well as your airlift, are usually dedicated to straight line kind of flights. Shoot me down, but if they get to their target, they're going to bomb it. The fighter bomber was a little bit extraneous in that because it's like a larger version of anything that the long range penetrator could be. Light airlift, I got Nimbus doing that, like the C-130. And a medium airlift, which Supernova does, just like the medium bomber is. And C-17, something, medium size. Obviously, the super size would be the C5, and that's considered in this stuff here. But like his heavy airlift, you really don't kind of need that. But C5, B-52 heavy bomber, that's in there. After that, you start getting into, like I said, the lower ones, dogfighter, the Hatro trainer, the hard throw trainer, which is basically teaching people how to throw your interceptor, your javelin, since it's so important. It gets its own. I have Quill doing that. Those roles are kind of interchangeable. It just depends on you, which one's a newer plane or which one's just a little bit better than the other, and relegate the other one to your Hatro trainer. The lead-in large trainer and the lead-in small trainer. People question that, but that's like self-explanatory. Again, if you look them up, they're basically like what you get taught before you actually get into a fighter cockpit. Or in some cases, you're in the fighter's cockpit, you're in a two-seater version, a trainer, like the F-15D to the F-15 family. It's really just a trainer. Can't carry weapons, but it's to help you train in the plane. We don't like doing that nowadays too much anymore, but it was a thing. Not so much like the F4 or the F-14 where you needed a backseater. That was literally to train how to fly the aircraft. I guess we decided that's kind of stupid, but you wouldn't know what to ask the U.S. Navy about that now because, like, the F-18E and F are all up there, and if you look on the squadron numbers, there's supposedly more E's than there are F's, but damned if you don't take pictures of more F's than E's. Swear to God, you'd think there's more F's out there because you always see the double-seaters. I don't know why, but anyway. So anyway, your lead-in large and lead-in smalls are basically planes that could be a frontline plane. This happens to be just a big plane. This is a smaller plane. This plane could be interchangeable with anything that you see, anything up here. Could be short to medium range attack, the interceptor, whatever you choose. It's just not as good, so you subject it to this before it goes to the reserves. I have Novolin doing that. I have Zephyr doing that. Zephyr is probably the last in line of the Wind Cutter family. I can't bring myself to get rid of it. That probably will happen shortly. My light throw trainer, the light throw trainer, that's crucial. I think it is. Obviously, I didn't put it. It's a full expansion. You don't need them, but like I don't like if you're an adult, if you've been through and you love your planes and you have little kids around, you have other adults around and they grab your planes and they don't know how to throw them and stuff like that, you hand them these and you say like, here, learn on this. Don't learn on one of my cool planes. That's exactly what they're for. And Elytro is to lightly throw it. Exactly that. Goblin does that, and it's so like your heavy bombers might be carrying a load. You don't want to throw them heavy. You don't want to even throw them even regularly. So you teach people how to throw them lightly, and they still fly really good. Um, Basically, the lead in small and lead in large take your regular throw, whereas your Hatro trainer takes like whatever your hardest throw is, and that may take some body mechanics. So that's why they're all different. The dead roll. Um, you may have heard Seed probably said that way, suppression of enemy air defenses. They've taken to calling it dead or deed if you kind of read it that way, where it is, defeat or depression or deception of enemy air defenses. I call it defeat. Um, Kind of the wild reservoir. I've just went into that before, and again, it's like the plane that's like a decoy. It's like, oh, we're launching. It should be pretty freaking long range, so it's gonna suck for you because it'll probably be one of your better planes, but you kind of have to let it like take the brunt of the hit while your best plane goes out there and penetrates and gets all the glory. So, like my Phase 3 is doing that for the moment. Um, and then Patrol Fighter and Control Fighter, I almost want to put those in extraneous just because like there's really almost no reason for that. Control Fighter is like a longer range variant. This would surely be like what the F-15 is now. The F-22 is. But again, in paper combat, you really don't need that. Wyvern does that for me right now. And Control Fighter controls the skies, so it's pretty long range. It can go over your enemy's territory, make sure they don't throw other planes up. Whereas a Patrol Fighter is like when nobody's penetrated yet. You're just feeling each other out, so to speak. The Patrol Fighter doesn't go past your airspace. Doesn't go past the forward line of troops. It just patrols your territory. Cirrus does that. Um, and various planes have held both roles. The patrol fighter, that's maybe not even exclusively a fighter's thing, but like like air defense. F-106s did it, but they could be considered interceptors. It's really a tie-in, so again, it's for more roles. And then these other ones that are really ridiculous. The oversized airlift. That's if you build something KIA size. But I mean, if you do, and you can carry a whole other planes, a whole notebook on the plane, so on and so forth, extra paper to build a plane at the front. That's what your oversized airlift could do, which almost makes it out of the extraneous role, but you just won't need it. It's pretty easy to shoot down. It's probably the size of your table, but that's the point. It carries a lot. Point defense, recently brought back. It used to only be 3. It was 4 because like certain planes, like it's like a short range interceptor. It like goes from point A to point B straight line like your interceptor, but only within your airspace. That's true point defense. Again, planes in the past have been labeled this way, but they really haven't done. It would be like get there fast and then get back, but don't really travel much past your homeland. I think the British Lightning was probably a good example of that because while they were quick, they had very limited range. But again, some of these are only by name only that they did their jobs. The VIP airlift, not for personnel. It's a very important piece. Very important piece is airlift. This plane, when developed, can be any size. Pretty straight in flight like most airlifters and bombers. However, it's probably a little stronger like your heavy, like a phylum, like your interceptor, so it can carry something and get it there fastest with the mostest. So a very important piece. You want it to be intact. You want it to make it, and it doesn't matter what size it is. So it could be anything, and nobody has that yet because unless OE's MUPs. However, MUP can be any aircraft, and it works. So, and then the aerial demonstration team. Your Red Arrows, your Freca Tricolora, your Thunderbirds, Blue Angels, Snowbirds, what have you. Only a couple of us have those so far. And I suspect like it's just a way to make a aircraft flamboyant. It's a way to make it like make people enjoy your planes, get them out there, see them and say like, oh man, I'd like to do that. It's the enticing aircraft. I usually like to make them with the brightest colors. It's a good plane to do. It's a good plane to have. And I shouldn't say plane, but like your design, and then it's a team, so there'd be 5 or 6 of them. We liken to having them as being like a project mothership kind of thing, where there's a big plane and it launches 4 or 5 or 6 little planes, and they all do the same. So, and there's that. Those are the planes. Those are the roles. Quick rundown. I'll break that down. We'll break that down for you more as time goes on. I just want to get a video out there because we need to get the videos out there. And sorry, it was long-winded. Sorry, this was like very descriptive, but you did follow along. I just feel we need to rehash this from time to time so people don't forget. Uh, and there you have it. Questions, comments, leave them up there. Let me know. We'll probably go into deal in more detail of this later on, just so you know. But that was this month's Tech Talk. Hopefully this week's, but this month's right now because we haven't had one in a while. Yeah, thanks for sitting in. Thanks for listening. Keep 'em flying.